I'm looking for some notes to share with you more about grace. And I just remembered a song that I wrote a while ago, and it goes like this. Let me grow in love. Let me grow in grace. Let me move mountains. Let my faith be great. I should be releasing this song, but until then, let's speak about grace. So the grace of God is what empowers us to bring forth a promise. Without the grace of God, there is no promise. Without the grace of God, there is no salvation. We are saved by grace through faith. So the same way we are being saved is the same way we are seeing promises come to pass. It's by grace through faith. Now, what is grace? I already mentioned that grace is God's transformational power. This is the power that you need in order to move and see a result. Very often, people expect you to change by yourself. When you come to Christ, they expect you to just do the work and change yourself. But that's the whole point about the grace. You can't do it on your own. You need God's grace. So God's grace is a dimension. Just as sin is a dimension, so is grace, because He has transferred us from the domain of darkness into His domain of light. So when we think about grace, think about this. Grace is a domain. It's not only unlimited favor, because we are favored by God. He came to save us. But what grace does is it makes you be able to do something. For example, if you have an addiction and you can't break it, you need grace to break it. You cannot do it on your own, with your own thoughts, like now I'm going to break this. But it's God's power that breaks it off of you. Grace says, I will do it for you. You just surrender the control, which does not mean that you are not in control of anything. We are going to clarify this as well. But what grace says is, let me do it for you. Let me help you. And you just receive and surrender. But very often people have an issue and a problem with receiving. They do not know how to do it because they still focus on working, on works. So they frustrate the grace of God. As a result, they can't receive. Because if I'm trying to do it by myself while asking God for grace, guess what? I'm not going to receive it, because growing in grace implies that I let go of the works that I want to do. Does this make sense? I want to read to you a few Bible verses. Let's read Romans chapter 7, verse 18. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. For to will is present with me. But how to perform that which is good, I find not. And this is all about grace. So grace says it's done, it's finished. It gives you the capacity and the ability to do it. Because what is the law? The law demands, but it does not supply the power to do it. It just tells you, this is what you need to do, this is what you have to do. But it does not give you the power that is required to accomplish that thing. Now, grace on the other side is telling you, this is how you need to live. This is how God is. God is love, right? God is patient. He gives you an understanding about how He is. He gives you an understanding about good and evil, so you can discern between the two. But then He comes and supplies to you the power that you need. So God is saying, let me do it for you, and you just receive. You do not need to work for your salvation, for your deliverance. You just need to receive in your mind, in your heart, the truth that you have been saved for grace. And this is so difficult sometimes because we do not know how to receive. After God tells us that it's by grace, we go ahead and ask God, all right, God, what do you want me to do? What is my work? Like, what is the work? What do you mean? Like, what is the work? There is no work other than to believe in Jesus Christ. Even Jesus said this. Like, the only thing that you need to do, the only work that you have to do is to believe that Jesus was sent by God and that he died for you, and you do not need to do anything. Now, when you believe this in your heart, you are being transformed from the inside out. What happens is that a supernatural power starts to arise from the inside of you, and you suddenly can do things that you could not do them before. What is this? Grace. So this grace is this supernatural power that comes upon you when you understand that you do not have to work. Just the fact that you are a child of God gives you the access to receive the power of God, gives you the access to be free just because you are his child. So again, there is no capacity to perform. You do not have that power to perform if you are relying on works. I know that we have the Bible verse that says that even so faith, if it had not works, is dead, being alone. But what this means is not you working for your salvation. It's not you doing the work, but the works are the results that come from a transformed heart. So when you receive the grace of God, then this is accompanied by works. Why? Because it empowers you to do. God is doing in you what he pleases. He leads you without you having to strive for it. So we kind of have this backwards. It's not about working and then receiving the grace of God in order to see results, but it's about receiving the grace of God, which transforms us, and through that we can work. We can do something because we have the power. We have been energized. We have received from God, so we can give. But what do you want to give if you have not received anything? If there is no strength to change a situation, how do you want to change it? You can struggle, yes, you can do that, you can strive, but you won't achieve any change because grace empowers. So let me read Romans chapter 7 verse 1. Know ye not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law, how that the law hath dominion over a man as long as he liveth. Now, in order for sin to not have dominion over us, it means that we need to change the territory. We need to be taken from the territory of sin and be translated somewhere else. Now we know that dominion has to do with territories. And that's why I told you that grace is a domain as well. We are not living in the domain of sin any longer, but in the domain of grace. All right, so let me read to you this. Sin works within a people as an automated system. So does righteousness. Righteousness does the will of God and keeps the commandments by grace done. People struggling because they try to fulfill grace by the law by keeping it. They try to live by faith through grace by keeping the law. It's not about not keeping God's commandments, but fulfilling them. The reason Jesus came. All right? So the issue with a lot of people is that they are trying to fulfill grace by the law. Like, do this, do that. And you are trying to keep the law in order to see results, because grace transforms you to see results. But if there is no grace, there are no results. There is no transformation. Whenever you go to God, you just need to wait on God. Sometimes people do not have that grace to break through. Why? Because they need to grow in grace. This is exactly what I saw in my dream. The Lord was showing me and he was teaching me, you need to grow in grace to see your promise. You need to grow in grace to break that addiction. You need to grow in grace. And not only that, but you need to be connected to people that have been graced and have that capacity and ability to give it to you. Listen to this. If a person has already gone through the process, it means that they have grown in grace. They have accumulated, so to say, the grace to break through. Now they can transfer it to you. Whenever they pray for you, you receive that grace because you connect to them. Whenever you connect to a ministry that is full of grace, whenever they have experienced a breakthrough, you will experience it as well. Why? Because they have the grace to make you experience that. They can transfer it to you. If a prophet prophesies prosperity over you, they need to have it themselves and then give it to you. Then you will experience it as well. If there is no grace to prosper, then you are not going to prosper. Growing in grace is very often about following God, about walking with Him. And as He leads you, you are growing and growing, you are transforming, you are changing your mind, your heart, your life, your surroundings. And this is how you grow in grace. And through this transformation, you suddenly realize that God has led you so much, and this was by His grace. Now you can transfer that thing onto somebody else, and they can experience the very same thing. This is pretty much connected to testimonies, because when you have a testimony, it means that you have become the Word. So the Word has such power when you speak it because it's part of you. You have experienced it. There is a grace within you. You are like that vessel that is filled with grace for a specific thing. For example, when you prophesy deliverance over somebody, it means that you have experienced that deliverance. Now, when you prophesy to somebody, and you tell them that God wants to set them free, those people will experience the same level of deliverance that you have experienced. You cannot go beyond, but you need to grow even more in grace, or to connect to somebody that has the grace. All right? So connect to a ministry that has the grace. I wrote here this note: allow grace to fulfill the law, and don't try to fulfill grace by the law. Don't try to fulfill grace by the law.